Have you ever just felt, I don't know, creatively devastated? No, I don't mean writer's block, just feeling as if the very act of making anything is utterly pointless. Yes? No? Look, let's cut out the really intelligent, catchy opener thing here and just get to it. I've been feeling that way for a long time now, and I've also encountered a lot of other people more or less expressing the same thing. And, well, it feels like it's a plague. Is it really all that surprising, though? Genuine, earnest creation is pretty hard. I don't mean making something, I mean really creating something, building something that you have some degree of pride in. Making stuff when you really want to express something, that's hard. It takes effort. And all of the stuff going on in the world makes it so much easier to just do anything else. So that's what I've been doing. Literally anything else. Funny enough, everything else includes visiting a lot of worlds in VRChat. You know what? This feels weird. This is a VRChat video. That's better. Anyway, VRChat worlds. I've been visiting a lot of them. They're cool. You might know that already if you're already subscribed to this channel. If not, here's your 2-sentence explainer. VRChat's a social platform. It's primarily accessed through VR headsets, wherein all the content is created by the users. That means that things like this avatar, for example, or the worlds that are now behind me, are all created by people and not the company. It's a pretty magical place. I've done a few videos on it. You should go watch them. But since I'm making this video in 2025, there's a good chance that your view of VRChat is dictated by, quite frankly, awful YouTube content. So yeah, as you can see by the stuff behind me, it's actually kind of cool. But back on topic. One of the worlds that I'd visited truly fixed me, and finally gave me my creative mojo back. This is about that, as well as why making things is hard. At least for me. Mobius is a narrative, story-based walking simulator type world in VRChat that explains the creative journey of the world's author, Church, and, well, making the world itself.
I'm going to tell you the story of Mobius, which, by definition, is the past 2 years of my life. So whenever you're ready, you can just grab that disc right off the desk and put it into the player.
Think of Mobius kind of like someone giving a director's commentary describing everything about the world you're in, except the commentary is basically the world is basically the world, and, well, you can imagine why it's called Mobius.
In simple terms, that's what Mobius is. An unfinished idea. But if the idea was never finished, would you really be here now?
Mobius is separated into chapters, each featuring a different version of the world itself during a different point in its completion. In Mobius, you'll often revisit the same environments multiple times in various stages of development. Each time, they're recontextualized, and each time, you learn a little bit more about the world and about Church himself. The first chapter, Madness, begins with a brief voiceover from the world's creator, Church. In it, he describes starting a project, showing it to friends, having them show interest, feeling motivated, and then hitting a roadblock, where you simply don't know what to do next. As you walk around, more is revealed to you. You explore, and you can see both this original version of the world itself, as well as artifacts of development, scripts on the floor, hallways, and corridors that lead nowhere. Very early on, you're told that originally, this place was meant to be a particular type of VRChat world. Church calls out surreal walking simulator pretty early on, and based on the initial environments, that fits. Organism is probably the best example of this, a series of worlds by creator Dr. Morrow that are utterly beautiful surreal masterpieces, of which nothing is explained to you. You simply have to figure out what it means for yourself. This world is, or at least the initial intent for it, clearly inspired by these worlds, and if you're someone who has done a little adventuring in VRChat, then this is probably obvious before the narration even kicks in. However, the narration itself is key to what's really going on in this world. As Church describes this version, you can hear something else in the voiceover, a constant, ever-present critique, wherein he is casting doubt on the quality or feasibility of what he's building.
It still kind of retains that walking simulator aspect today. Take that as you will in playing this world. But anyways, I showed these environments to a lot of people, and you know what? I got so much support. I had people giving me ideas, I had a lot of positive feedback. And it wasn't even that good of quality back then. I was only just learning how to make worlds.
Mobius, from the very first moment, is presenting what I would call an endearing mess of ideas and thoughts. Sometimes you'll be presented with text on a wall that could be funny, or it could be intensely revealing and vulnerable. Other times, you'll be introduced to a new gimmick that adds new depth to a space. For example, a camera that lets you photograph patches of light to see even more of Church's commentary on his project. At first, all this seemed like a representation of the chaos in Church's creative process, of just trying to build something around, I don't know, life. By itself, I thought this was pretty cool, interesting, at the very least. Not the usual sort of experience you expect to have in a VRChat world. I think what really caught me, though, what really dragged me in, was something that happens shortly after Chapter 2 begins. This chapter begins by Church explaining why he's so stuck on this particular project. He wants it to be meaningful. Well, up to this point, he's made things that were meaningful to him. This world, Mobius, is meant to be more than that. He wants you, the person in the world, to connect with it. But he expresses anxiety at being able to do that.
I don't know if you've been to any of my other worlds on this platform, but 9 times out of 10, they have some sort of symbolism hidden within them. And that symbolism was really only ever placed there for me. I wanted to expand that symbolism into something more memorable and impactful for people other than myself. But how do I tell a meaningful story? I still don't even know how.
At this point, you end up outside one of the environments you'd previously been in, looking at it through a bunch of highly critical feedback. This feedback is brutal, but it's coming entirely from the author. Interestingly enough, as this is presented to you, the narrative voice, very straightforward until this point, refuses to comment on this particular part. Though I don't know if he would need to. The design of this part is telling enough. You are seeing the room you just left, except through a thick wall of critique that you can't ignore. That previous room, that thing you were just navigating, is entirely recontextualized, not as a place in VRChat you could explore, but as a historical thing. It turns it from a game into something of a museum piece, of something in a state of analysis. It puts you in the shoes of Church, looking, quite literally, back on a piece of work, and almost being entirely separated from any creative worth it might have had. Ha! Glad I can't relate to that. Soon enough, though, you move on, only briefly touching the vulnerability underneath Mobius. In the next room, Church explains that he wanted to make Mobius puzzle-based. He talks about being inspired by the Doom mod called My House, an existential, subversive horror mod that is often described as being inspired by House of Leaves.
I was about halfway through development of Mobius, or at least this iteration, when it came out. I saw it and I thought it was really cool, so I wanted to make something like it myself.
Church describes it as obscure, although despite not being really in tune with indie or horror games, I'd certainly heard of it, mostly because it was so critically acclaimed and had, itself, inspired so many people.
So, being me in my search of whatever I was trying to do with this world, I tried to integrate similar concepts into Mobius. Now, instead of walking through a bunch of environments, you had to find a key or decode Morse code or something to get to the end.
The way Church talks about My House is interesting. Church frames it as inspiration, but the subtext here is better described as being in the middle of a creative project when you find something else you find meaningful and interesting. It's cool, and yes, inspiring, but it also makes you feel a little bad about what you're working on. But hey, you found something cool here, so maybe you can take bits out to fix your thing. Glad I can't relate to that either. I'm not really good at making video essays. If I'm honest, I don't even really enjoy it. If you want to know why there hasn't been one in a long time, like 2 years, that's kind of the reason why. I like writing. I love writing, actually. That's how I fed myself my entire adult life. But no one reads shit anymore. That was really the motivation for me making my first video essay. I'd written these 10 stories and shared them with friends, and after a month, no one had read them. If I couldn't get people that cared about me to read the stuff I'd written, what hope would I ever have to get anyone to read my stuff? Professionally or academically, yeah, I can get people to read that. But the things I really cared about, why did I need that anyway? Why did I need an audience? I I've watched a lot of video essayists, typical ones, and I saw how people reacted to their work, how people would leave these long comments and everything. I wanted that. I wanted someone to engage with what I made. I wanted to feel like something I said or done mattered. Like my presence here had some sort of meaning. So at this point, you sort of see the direction of the world. And hey, it's pretty cool. We're going to go through some iterations, see frustration in the creative process, and go through whatever was to become of this world at the same time. You sort of get the loop. But then chapter 3 begins, and the tone shifts pretty dramatically. You're told that, well, this is going to be a short one. You're told it will be bittersweet.
Can you see it? It guides you, doesn't it? It shines so uniquely and so beautifully. Why wouldn't it?
It suddenly feels different. Mobius, to this point, isn't really shy about showing emotion, yet, until this point, those things seemed well within the bounds of what's comfortable. Likewise, any earnestness feels scattered. It has the vibe of a friend telling you, hey, I got dumped. Anyway, how about them birds? Despite the fact that there's a lot of what I can only call sad boy relationship bait throughout it, that's how it even starts. It just always fades into the background somehow. But here, in this chapter, that changes. Church pretty quickly introduces the concept of the North Star. What is the North Star? Church doesn't say exactly, at least not yet. But it doesn't matter really. The tone, the setting, the choice of words, the music, it all suddenly makes things get sentimental and squishy, raw. There's metaphor here, clearly, but it's as thin as cellophane. Pointing up at the sky, at the star, the person I was going through the world with literally just yelled, "He found an e-kitten!" Anyway, the chapter ends, and you're back to the house. The music's upbeat, and the mid-chapter sequence features a voicemail of Church describing the story again. In it, he also describes it as
A metaphor for everything that's happened in the past, year to me, right?
From this point on, we're introduced to a new series of environments, a new script, a new direction, all of which are centered around this new source of inspiration in his life. The puzzle elements stop being a means to an end, sans one fun reference back to Doom, obviously hinting at the weight of influence that my house had on him, and more, I don't know, a look under the veil. The messages you discover, the narration, everything about the process becomes raw. Very soon it becomes apparent the level of which Church is exposing himself in the world. It's honestly uncomfortable. I could feel myself reacting in a way that felt like, ugh, like this is cringe. Now, to be clear, I don't mean that as an insult. This is more me taking myself on than anyone else. I'm honestly blown away by someone's ability to be this open about what they're going through in such a public way in a VR chat world. As you progress through Mobius, as you get to those final chapters, you're presented with a very real, very blunt experience of what I'd call your typical VR chat relationship. Church, the creator of the world, describes something that inspires him, gives his time meaning, and then it quickly fades away, almost as quick as it began. This, however, provides context for him. While a relationship ending is painful, as he describes it as such, he finds some meaning in it, both in a personal sense and also for the sake of the world. Clearly, some version of Mobius was meant to show how finding a North Star can carry you through, how you can be saved, how someone else can help you find meaning. Of course, it doesn't end that way. The relationship ends, and with it, all the previous work done creatively is recontextualized in that light.
But then, just like that, it was over again. Just as quickly as it came, it was gone again.
It ruins it, once again. These final chapters happen fast. The series of events is rapid, and that's appropriate for reasons I'll get into soon. Nevertheless, it's through the pain of loss in this relationship that Church has a realization. An earlier chapter was named Inner Stability, which is a word he'd made up to describe this concept of no longer becoming codependent. Church explains that he wanted to describe the opposite of that, of escaping from it, of breaking free from it. Yet following the ending of this relationship, and maybe some others that might have been hinted at, he'd realized it wasn't the only thing he'd been codependent on. Mobius, as a project, was something he felt like he couldn't finish on his own, something he couldn't finish without inspiration, either from other art or from someone else. He was stuck in a loop. He'd find inspiration, get attached to it, and then it would end, and he would begin the process again, perpetually iterating on this thing, never letting go, never letting others see the mess of it. In short, he wanted Mobius to mean something, to explain something. He was looking to his art to solve a problem, much in the way he was looking to other things to solve the problems present within Mobius. At this point, he realized he'd obtained the story he wanted for the project all along, the loop, being stuck in it, and finally saying, no, I don't have to do this. I can be free of it. Mobius hits its climax suddenly. In a way, it feels almost rushed. Church goes through more loss, finds another object of affection, loses that, and just when you expect the cycle to continue, to become another loop, it ends. And being able to accept Mobius for what it is, he's finally able to finish the project. If I take a good hard look at my life, especially when I started making these things, it honestly becomes really apparent that the situations I'd found myself in were not great. I was on the tail end of a decade-long relationship that was rapidly crumbling. I was in a career that felt like it was draining my soul. The aforementioned relationship had taken so much of my energy and time that I'd lost connection with most of my friends. But making these felt safe. I could always squeeze the time in. I ended up in a place that was so far from what I wanted, but at least in these, I could have something I could control. When I released the first one, when people really watched it, liked it, it was addicting. It felt like I was filling a void, especially at that part of my life. Do I want that? Is it even healthy to want that? Mobius is very much a VRChat story. I think if you're watching this video and you've never interacted with VRChat content before in your life, you'd still enjoy it. But I think to really get it, you have to be at least a little immersed in VRChat. And when I say immersed in VRChat, I don't mean
is full of incels.
Look who's talking.
Yeah, I can't tell if you're real or not. Is this satire?
They can't with me. Okay, I got 10K followers on TikTok.
no. The average VRChat experience isn't whatever that was. The truth is more akin to what is described throughout Mobius. Making friends, sharing stuff with them, maybe making more than friends, having things not work or work, and finding yourself growing or not growing in the process. It's very normal. It's very life. That is really something that most media, both built within VRChat and also externally about VRChat, fundamentally miss about this place. VRChat is really just, I don't know, hyper reality, but still reality. And I know, I can feel the revulsion, the automatic comment response, and some people watching, eager to pump out line after line about how I must need some serious psychological help if you think that this is anything close to real life, touch grass, blah, 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 something. But okay, if that is you, if you're judging places or people or whatever from cooked out videos or social posts or whatever, VRChat or not, then please stop. The actual VRChat, to me at least, feels totally normal, just more. Like, you know how when you go on a vacation to a place and you get the tourist experience, you know that you're not seeing the real place. You're just getting a heightened, polished, more dopamine-soaked version of that thing. In those cases, no, you're not getting a glimpse of everyday life, but you are getting fundamentally something real, with real people doing real things in a real place. Just more. If you look past the anime avatars or furries or whatever, the conversations I'm having here aren't that different than the ones I had in grad school with people after class. They're not that different than ones I have with my real life friends who, like, have kids and don't know what an e-boy is. It just feels normal, just louder. More stuff, more environments, more conversations. And that volume being turned up does change things, but it's not that weird. And I'll die on that hill. But I think the volume turned up is one of the things that is just present here in Mobius, and it's something that I think if you're a VRChat user, you'll just notice. Things go faster in VRChat because there's more, and because it's right there. Relationships move faster. I've become close friends with people at a rapid pace. In real life, and by this I mean real American life, you're basically never going to have those third space experiences. You go to work, school, you go home, and that's it. You just don't have time for anything else. And if you do, it's a weekend thing or a once a month thing. There's just so much friction. You're probably not going to drive an hour just to hang out for 30 minutes. In VRChat, though, there's no friction. That hour of driving and 30 minutes of hanging out that you don't choose to do anyway becomes an hour and a half of hanging out every night or more. Likewise, there's no game here, so to speak. You're mostly just socializing. That's intense in every way. Like, imagine your people. Are they creative? Well, you're going to be around that 10 times as much. Modeling avatars or worlds, making music, writing, role-playing, it doesn't matter. Here, you're exposed to many things, all in excess, to whatever end you want. Like, you know how in college you feel like you rapidly evolve? I think we all get that because it's of the level of exposure to everything, especially other people that you have. That's what's going on here, but constantly. Not just for 4 years of your life. That feeling, that vibe is present in Mobius. There's an intensity that feels very melodramatic, very young adult, very, as I said before, cringe. But it feels authentic. To me, at least, this was a breath of fresh air. Maybe it's because I'm a millennial and it feels like we grew up at an age of 30-level deep irony, but hearing someone say, hey, my heart was broken, I can't figure my shit out creatively, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I really want to share these feelings, was, I don't know, it felt novel. And being so transparent, not only do I feel that Church manages to express his own feelings, but I also think that he captures something uniquely VRChat. In Mobius, Church more or less says, yeah, I found the new girl, and she blew my socks off and made me want to write and reconfigure a whole-ass story about her. You're not supposed to say that, man. You're supposed to, throw some metaphor in there. Adding those extra coats of paint would make it more digestible, more acceptable. It would make it have wider appeal, yet it would feel less truthful, both to Church himself and to the platform his story exists in. Now, look, I'm not saying that there's something wrong with artfully and elegantly weaving emotions and meaning into a story. Clearly, that's how you're supposed to do it. There's a reason we generally don't hold up our personal journals as, high art. And yet, there's something to that, isn't there? The very act of opening up and being vulnerable and letting someone in and reading our most unpolished words out loud, it's messy. It's, yes, cringe. But most of all, it's human. It's powerful. God. I've been stuck here with this stupid fucking script for 4 months. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. In 2 years, I've probably written, 20,000 words of scripts, tidbits, whatever. I end up hating all of it. I work in the industry now. All this is my own, though. My thoughts, not my employer, so on and so on. But will people still see it that way? Should I just shut up? Should I find another medium? What else am I gonna do? Am I even good at this? Was I just always just making content? I mean, I haven't done this in 2 years for a reason. People don't want this sort of thing anymore. I've seen all these videos. People hate video essays now. They want short and snappy, not long, not emotional, not rambling. Who is this even for? Why, when I try to move forward with anything creative, I just find another reason not to? So here we are, pretty deep in, and while I've probably given the game up with these weird transmission things, what's with the title? How did, in fact, Mobius fix me? Well, creating things is hard. When I say that, I think people might hear something different based on if they've actively engaged in the process of creation for a long time or not. I think if you spend a long time on the internet, or anywhere else really, in creative spaces, and you fall down the rabbit hole of, I am struggling to create, why is it hard to create? You're gonna run into a lot of guides talking about writer's block or that sort of thing. You're gonna run into guides into the mechanics of creation. And don't get me wrong, that stuff can be mechanically hard. Mobius is a great example. Making a VRChat world, pretty difficult. These things take a lot of time and effort to make. There's a lot of learning you have to do before you can even start to produce something interesting, or something at all. But earnestly, I don't think that's why making things is hard. At least it isn't for me. What makes creating hard, for me, is that every time I make anything, it feels like I'm performing some sort of mitosis. I'm making some sort of blood sacrifice. I'm cutting into myself, letting some blood out, often more than I'd like, and then infusing that in some ritual. Everything I make, it's all of me. I've mentioned that, or at least the through lines for it throughout this video. For that reason, there's this need for me to make everything I create meaningful in some way. Like it has to connect, it has to have depth, it has to do something very particular, and I never ever can get there, which makes me try to wring more blood out. Successful creation means all that exsanguination leads you to passing out on the publish button. But most of the time, you stop before that point. You have just enough energy left from the blood loss to judge yourself, but not enough self-control to not annihilate yourself in the process. This energy was something I saw in Mobius, both in the creation of a world about the creative process itself, which feels incredibly vulnerable as it is, but also in the need Church expresses throughout the story to fit a narrative to all these pieces. He talks about trying to find a story everywhere, of being inspired by everything, of trying to make the pieces fit in any way he can. These things, all these individual parts, they all mean something to you. They all individually mean something to Church. Every environment is a little autoethnography. Individually, I think you could just put them out there, but that's too vulnerable. The trick for the creator is sewing together the most vulnerable parts of yourself in such a way that the narrative provides a distraction. Yes, it allows you to say, this is of me, but in such a way that shows experience, shows craft, shows a desire to illuminate something human about all of us. And in that, you get to hide. We're all looking to transmute something pretty specific through whatever art we most connect to or are most competent in. Consequently, one of the things you learn as an artist of any kind is that part of the process is building up your taste, getting an understanding for what's good. Any artist in a field will be able to spit out tons of recommendations for good art, for things that really inspired them. With enough time, you then take that sense of taste and direct it at your own work as a barometer for if the thing you're making is good. This is generally a good thing. Like, you know that vrchat bit earlier about how being around people with similar goals or aims as you then elevates you because of exposure? Well, it's like that. The more you interact with your field, the better you get. But at the same time, something else happens. The more art you make or consume, the more you pick up like fleas. I've struggled a bit with describing this, for me at least, because it's not one particular thing. Like right here, I wanted to dramatically talk about just one singular thing, one big revelation that Mobius made me have about making things, that totally got me to start making video essays again, that got me to start writing again. And that's true, but there's not one singular reason for it. These fleas you pick up, well, there's so many things. Over time, the more you learn, the more your taste gets refined, the more it feels harder to transmute that rawness, that thing you originally tapped into. In my terms, making that first video essay, there's no expectation there. Who cares if I'm vulnerable, if a joke doesn't land, if it's not perfectly organized? And yeah, there's that vulnerability. And talking about yourself. Every video essayist I've ever fallen in love with, they've all given up the ghost in one video or another. My favorite art they've ever made is when they'll be themselves. Totally. Not just in style, but when they drop the artifice and look into the camera and say, yeah, so this one's about me, and shit was painful. But then you say to yourself, well, they can do that because they have all these followers, and of course people care about their experiences. That's different. Then you hear the other voices. Look at how good their editing is, their writing, their lighting, all of it. Hell, even things that can be perceived as a negative begin to take on a mystic light to you. Yeah, those video essayists that release one video a year and work on that thing nonstop to polish it up. What artistes? Meanwhile, you don't have any of that same kindness for yourself. You never have the luxury of seeing the finished product with virgin eyes. At best, you get to see it 2 years after it's finished, when you've forgotten most of the struggle of bringing it alive and now have an entirely new set of skills to judge it against. Mind you don't have to do this. You don't have to suffer through any of it. You can just make stuff. You can make anything, really. But I feel like when you really, and yes, I know how flimsy and unphilosophical this is, aren't just making stuff but are creating, you are fundamentally doing this thing where so much of you is on display. Because I think when we're creating, what we are fundamentally doing is trying to find a way for others to see us. That is, see us and the thing we create and the medium we choose to do it in, and the thing we choose to focus on, everything, there's an intimacy in it. You can make a dating profile with all of your information and stats, pictures, movies, whatever on it. Or you can just include a single song, a story, a vrchat world, whatever. And that thing will say more and include more about you than anything else, no matter how much detail you include in that original profile. But, and this is the painful thing, this is the hard thing, it can only fundamentally be that deep if someone is willing to engage with it fully. But you can't tell them, you can't show them the blood. They have to figure it out for themselves. And the thing is, most people won't. And that is why creating's hard. Everything you make, it's all just breadcrumbs to you, the purest version of you, and your fingerprints will be everywhere on that thing. You know that this thing you're building, this golem of your own flesh, is something that contains a multitude of you, a combined amalgamation of every experience, trauma, every note you've heard, word you've read, and thing you've touched with your own hand. It's something made not of individual things, but the space between them, the ineffable you, the relation of everything together. In short, and in less flowery language, to create is to make something that only you can, that can't really be made by anyone else, because no one else is you and has your hand. No, the real reason is that if you make something, it can be rejected. So don't. Instead, you can choose the artsy way of doing things. Hit them with the old razzle-dazzle. Or maybe you can just, I don't know, stuff it full of AI art. Let the machine feel for you, smoothing out the edges so that your content is the most mathematically likely pattern for a human-like thing to connect to. Or you can just not do anything. You can just walk away. That's what I did. Realistically, what this whole thing is about is that. Sorry, I've made you sit through my therapy session. I stopped making stuff, basically anything, and blamed it on, well, everything but the truth. I got a new job. I got divorced. I did this. I did that. All perfectly viable excuses. But none of them are true. At least, not to me. The reality? Man, it's complicated. My main motivation for making video essays has always been connecting with people. I want people to see me, right? I want them to feel connected to my humanity in some way. I started doing this in 2020, and since then, God, man, things rapidly changed. I mean, they always do, but whatever. I'm old. I get to feel that way. The rise of AI everything, the tons of junk content, video essay turning into basically a slur, most YouTube long-form content becoming elaborate call-out posts with a focus on slick editing over, I don't know, heart, that need to be seen, even before this, was a huge risk, right? Like making something and opening it up to judgment. Whoa, scary. But that's not the thing that got to me. What got to me was that, well, the previous fears, all of it, those are all still true. Those are all things you contend with. But then on top of that, you have all of that, what the kids say, slop out there. And I think the potential fear as a person making a thing, at least that I have, is that someone would look at what I made and think it was just like that. Someone would see this and think it's just 40 minutes long for the ad revenue. For a long time, I couldn't really handle that. So I just didn't make anything. Every few months, I would think to myself, this feels like maybe something I should write about. Maybe I should do that. And I wouldn't. Or rather, I would, but then it'd just become something I would look at and look at and look at and decide it sucked eventually and do nothing with it. And then I saw Mobius. Was church going through the same stuff? No. But it connected with me. And despite it being messy, well, no, not despite, explicitly because it was messy. And I saw him in that world and I connected with it. After I finished it, I sat down and wrote out a script, simply talking about the world. I kept going and going and going, and it turned into, well, this. At the same time, I kept telling myself it was dumb, bad, stinky, poopy, whatever, but I kept coming back to it. Unlike the other scripts that I'd tried to put together over the last 2 years, the vulnerability in Mobius, the willingness to just completely dive into the creative process in the messiest way possible, all while an audience was watching, it fixed me. Something about Mobius that I haven't really touched on too much is the device Church uses to move between chapters. Instead of just jumping from section to section, you instead return to his room, or more accurately, his home. Here, you move forward in the story by going to his desktop and then clicking on something to load the next chapter. Between each chapter, the room changes. There's a sense of movement, of time passing. You get glimpses of the person behind the world, of Church. These things, in me at least, stirred a sort of, oh, that's who this guy is. The little nods to Halo, to Red versus Blue, instantly letting me know that, hey, that's where this dude got his name from. Stuff like that. These little moments felt like microcosmic stories, little tidbits highlighting, underlining, circling the vulnerability, the humanity of the person making this thing. These moments, more than anything else, got me to make this video. These levels aren't complicated. They're simple, but they're obsessively personal. A few years ago, more than a few now actually, I played a DJ set at a friend's venue in vrchat. It was a very ambient sort of thing. I remember afterwards she came up to me and said, "That set smelled like you." I've never forgotten about that. It was really the most concise way that anyone has ever told me that I'd achieved exactly what I wanted to creatively. These spaces in Mobius, they give me that same vibe. Despite having never talked to this person or interacted with them in any way, I feel like I've walked away from Mobius having learned a little about them. And that journey, of course, has helped me learn a little about myself too. It was meaningful. We make entirely different kinds of things, but that journey helped me contextualize my own. Not only that, but it helped me realize the solution to all of this. You see, the thing about being an artist, a creator, whatever, that's hard is that you're always relearning that same lesson. No matter how much you make, no matter how much you put out there, you still end up feeling the same vulnerabilities. They just end up manifesting in different ways. Was the thing that locked me down for 2 years really that different than any other thing I've contended with that's prevented me from just making the damn thing? Is this really about AI or criticism or vulnerability or whatever else I could say here? Yeah, a little bit. But fundamentally, it just comes down to the very simple reality that you're going to be dumping hours and hours of your earnest, honest work into the public arena. And you can tell yourself 1,000 times that you don't care about what people think, that you're doing it for you, that none of this matters and you just need to create, man. But at the end of the day, the truth is that you really just want someone to connect with the thing that you're making. You just want the thing that you've made to matter. You just want to matter. The thing is, though, there's really only one way to do that.